What if the person you least expected to meet holds the answers to your past? Judge Marcus Grant had built his life on order and discipline. Yet his world was thrown into chaos the day a bold 12-years-old girl named Nia walked into his courtroom. With a piercing gaze and a startling declaration, she shattered the walls of his carefully constructed life. "You're my father." What followed was a journey of unexpected revelations, emotional battles, and a quest for connection that neither could have imagined. Stay tuned as this extraordinary story of discovery and family unfolds. But before diving, let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because we'll be bringing you more amazing gift tomorrow. Now, let's start this journey together. Judge Marcus Grant sat at the high bench of Courtroom 3A, his gavel resting to one side as he flipped through the files stacked before him. The room hummed with the subdued murmur of lawyers, social workers, and families awaiting their turn. Marcus was known for his sharp focus and meticulous approach to family court cases. His rulings, always grounded in fairness and the law, had earned him respect in the legal community. Yet his reputation for composure concealed a private life of quiet isolation. Divorced and childless, Marcus had poured his energy into his career, leaving little room for personal fulfillment. The courtroom had become both his sanctuary and his prison. This morning, the docket was especially full. As the bailiff called the next case, Marcus adjusted his glasses and glanced at the name on the top file. Parker Nia. A sense of unease rippled through him, though he couldn't explain why. He pushed the feeling aside, straightened his robe, and prepared to proceed. The double doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open, revealing a slender young girl flanked by a social worker. Nia Parker walked in with a confidence that seemed almost defiant, her curly hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. Her oversized sweatshirt hung loosely over her frame, and her dark eyes swept the room with an intensity far beyond her 12 years. Marcus's gaze lingered on her, a strange familiarity stirring in his chest. Nia's movements were deliberate as she approached the plaintiff's table. She sat down, her posture straight, and crossed her arms over her chest. Her social worker, Ms. Harper, shuffled beside her, carrying a thick folder of documents. Marcus's voice, steady and authoritative, broke the low buzz of conversation. "Good morning, Ms. Parker," he began. "This hearing concerns your current foster placement and the concerns raised by your caseworker. Is that correct?" Nia nodded, her gaze unflinching. "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice was clear, but carried a maturity that felt unnatural for a child her age. Marcus leaned forward slightly, studying her. Most children in her position appeared scared or withdrawn, but Nia projected a poise that challenged his expectations. It was as if she had braced herself for a fight. Ms. Harper cleared her throat and began outlining the case. Nia had been moved between multiple foster homes following the death of her mother, Olivia Parker, 3 years ago. Her current placement had raised concerns of neglect, prompting an emergency hearing to determine her next steps. Harper spoke of Nia's intelligence and resilience, but also her struggles to form attachments. "She's been through a lot," Harper said, her tone softening. "But Nia is remarkably strong. She's learned to take care of herself in ways no child should have to." Marcus listened carefully, though his attention kept drifting back to Nia. There was something about her that he couldn't shake. As Harper continued, Marcus's mind wandered briefly to his own childhood, the rigid expectations of his upbringing, and the cold distance he had carried into adulthood. He pushed the thoughts aside and refocused on the case. When Harper finished, Marcus addressed Nia directly. "Ms. Parker," he said, his tone measured but kind. "I've heard from your social worker, but I'd like to hear from you. Is there anything you'd like to share about your situation?" Nia hesitated, her hands twisting the hem of her sweatshirt. Then, she stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The room stilled as all eyes turned to her. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "I've been in foster care for 3 years. I've lived in houses where no one cared if I ate dinner or did my homework. Places where I was just another kid they got paid to take care of. And now I'm here, being told where I'll go next like I'm some package no one wants. Her words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. The courtroom fell silent, even the stenographer's keys pausing momentarily. Marcus felt a pang of emotion he couldn't name. Was it empathy? Guilt? Something deeper? Nia, Marcus said gently, you've been through a lot. But I need to ask, what do you want? What are you hoping for from this hearing? Nia's bravado faltered slightly. She glanced down at her hands before meeting his gaze again. I want to belong somewhere, she said quietly. I want someone to care about me for more than just a check. Her words struck a nerve deep within Marcus. He thought of his own solitary life, the absence of connection that gnawed at him in quiet moments. Before he could respond, Nia added, almost as an afterthought, and I came here today because I have questions. Questions about my mom. Marcus tilted, his head slightly. Questions about Olivia? Nia nodded, her expression hardening. Questions about her. And about you. The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. His composure slipped momentarily, his hand tightening around the gavel. He stared at Nia, a flicker of recognition surfacing in his mind. Could it be possible? The courtroom seemed to freeze. Marcus felt the weight of her gaze, her eyes searching his, as if she were looking for confirmation of something unspoken. Memories of a different time surfaced in his mind. A younger version of himself, a vibrant woman with a warm laugh, and fleeting moments he had locked away. Before Marcus could respond, Ms. Harper intervened. Your Honor, she said, her tone cautious. Maybe we should focus on the immediate concerns. Nia's current placement needs resolution before anything else. Marcus raised a hand, silencing her gently. His focus remained on Nia. We will address all of your concerns, he said slowly, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. But for now, let's prioritize your safety and well-being. We can revisit the other matters soon. Nia nodded, her face unreadable as she sat back down. But Marcus could feel the unspoken words, lingering between them, like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. The hearing continued, but Marcus found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. His mind was clouded with questions he didn't know how to answer. When the session finally adjourned, Marcus retreated to his chambers, his usual sense of control shattered. He sank into his chair, staring at the closed file on his desk. For the first time in years, his carefully constructed world felt as though it were on the verge of collapse. Judge Marcus Grant sat alone in his chambers, his chair turned slightly toward the window. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows on the floor. He held a file in his lap, but his mind was miles away, caught in a swirl of memories he had long tried to suppress. The courtroom earlier that day had unearthed emotions he didn't fully understand. And now, faced with the possibility of an impossible truth, his thoughts turned to Olivia. Years ago, Marcus had been a young attorney just starting to climb the ranks. His ambition was boundless, and he had little time for distractions. Then Olivia walked into his life. She was a paralegal in his firm, intelligent, vibrant, and with a laugh that seemed to light up any room she entered. They had been drawn to each other almost instantly, their chemistry undeniable. Olivia challenged him in ways no one else ever had. Where Marcus was rigid and focused on control, Olivia was free-spirited, encouraging him to see beyond the black and white confines of his career. Their time together had been brief, but intense. Marcus had been consumed by his professional goals, often putting work ahead of their relationship. Olivia had been understanding at first, but eventually, she grew tired of being second to his ambitions. Marcus, she had said one night, her voice steady but laced with sadness. Life isn't just about climbing ladders. Sometimes, you need to look around and see who's climbing with you. Shortly after that conversation, Olivia left the firm, and it seemed his life. Marcus had thought of reaching out to her many times, but his pride always got in the way. Now, years later, her name and the face of a young girl, who could very well be his daughter, had brought all those memories rushing back. He closed his eyes and let out a long breath, trying to process the flood of emotions. The knock on his door startled him. "Come in," he called, quickly straightening in his chair. Ms. Harper, Nia's social worker, stepped inside, carrying a folder in her hands. Her expression was professional, but tinged with a hint of hesitation. "Thank you for seeing me, Judge Grant," she said, taking a seat across from his desk. "I thought it might be helpful to provide some additional context about Nia's situation." Marcus nodded, gesturing for her to continue. "Please go ahead, Ms." Harper opened the folder and handed him a photograph. It was a candid shot of Olivia and a much younger Nia, likely no older than 5 or 6. Olivia's arm was wrapped protectively around the little girl, her smile radiant. Nia was grinning, her face full of innocence and joy. Marcus stared at the photo, his chest tightening. The resemblance between the girl in the picture and the one who had stood before him in court was unmistakable. "Olivia," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Ms. Harper tilted her head slightly. "You knew her?" Marcus set the photograph down carefully, as if it were something fragile. "We worked together a long time ago. I didn't know she had a daughter." Harper's expression softened. She was a remarkable woman. Olivia worked 2 jobs to provide for Nia. She was fiercely devoted to her, even when things got tough. "What happened?" Marcus asked, his voice heavy with guilt and curiosity. Harper's tone grew somber. "Cancer. By the time she was diagnosed, it was too late to do much. She passed away 3 years ago. Nia has been in the foster system ever since." Marcus felt a wave of regret wash over him. While Olivia had been facing the hardest battle of her life, he had been oblivious, consumed by his work and his solitary routines. He clenched his fists, his thoughts racing with questions. Did Olivia ever think of him? Did she try to reach out? Did she want him to know about Nia? Did she? Marcus hesitated, his voice faltering. "Did Olivia ever mention me?" Ms. Harper nodded slowly. "She did once. She said you were a good man, but that you didn't know about Nia. Olivia didn't want to disrupt your life. She thought she could handle everything on her own." Marcus's heart ached at the thought. Olivia had been so strong, so selfless. And yet, her decision to keep him in the dark had robbed him of years he could have spent with his daughter. He picked up the photograph again, studying every detail as if it held the answers he so desperately needed. "What can you tell me about Nia?" he asked after a long pause. "What has her life been like these past 3 years?" Harper's expression grew more serious. "It hasn't been easy for her. Nia is incredibly resilient, but she's been moved between several foster homes. Some are better than others, but she's struggled to feel like she belongs anywhere. She's learned to rely on herself because she's had no one else to depend on." Marcus's grip tightened on the edges of the photo. The thought of Nia navigating such a difficult life alone filled him with a mixture of anger and determination. "She deserves better," he said, his voice firm. "She does," Harper agreed. "But I should warn you, Judge Grant. Nia has been let down by a lot of people. She's built walls to protect herself, and she's not quick to trust. If you're going to be part of her life, you need to be prepared for her to push you away at first." Marcus nodded, the weight of Harper's words settling heavily on him. "I understand, but I can't walk away from this. I need to find out the truth." Harper reached into the folder and handed him another document. "A paternity test would be the first step. If you're serious about this, I can help arrange it." Marcus took the paper, his resolve solidifying. "I am serious," he said. "Whatever it takes, I need to know." As Ms. Harper left his chambers, Marcus remained seated, the photograph still in his hand. He traced the edges of Olivia's face with his thumb, memories of her laughter and warmth flooding his mind. He looked at Nia's beaming face and felt a flicker of hope amid the guilt and uncertainty. For the first time in years, Marcus Grant felt the faint stirrings of something he thought he had long since buried: purpose. And he knew that no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, he owed it to Olivia and to Nia to see this journey through. The early morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Marcus Grant's chambers, reflecting off the polished wooden surfaces and stacks of legal documents. Yet, the usually composed judge found himself staring at the papers without seeing them. The decision to proceed with a paternity test weighed heavily on him, not because he doubted the need for answers, but because of what those answers might mean for the life he had built. Marcus took a deep breath and picked up the phone to arrange the test. After a short conversation with the lab coordinator, the appointment was set for later in the week. The logistical details were simple enough, a few forms, a cheek swab, but the emotional complexity was another matter entirely. Later that afternoon, Marcus met with Ms. Harper and Nia in his chambers. The tension in the air was palpable as the door closed behind them. Nia walked in with her usual guarded confidence, her arms crossed and her eyes scanning the room as though searching for hidden motives. Ms. Harper took a seat near the door, ready to intervene if necessary, while Nia settled into the chair across from Marcus's desk. "Thanks for coming, Nia," Marcus began, his tone carefully measured. "There's something important I want to discuss with you." Nia raised an eyebrow, her skepticism obvious. "Let me guess, another meeting about my placement?" "No," Marcus replied gently. "This is about finding answers. Answers you deserve." For the first time, Nia's expression softened, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What kind of answers?" Marcus leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together on the desk. "You said in court that you had questions about your mother, and about me. I think it's time we find out the truth." Nia tilted her head, her suspicion returning. "You mean you want to take a test? Like a DNA test?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "If you're okay with it, I'd like to take a paternity test to see if I'm your father." The room fell silent as Nia stared at Marcus, her expression unreadable. Finally, she shrugged, though her voice carried a hint of vulnerability. "Sure, do what you need to do. Not like this is the first time someone's made promises they couldn't keep." The comment stung, but Marcus didn't flinch. He leaned in slightly, his voice steady but warm. "Nia, this isn't just about the test. No matter what the results say, I want you to know that I'm here for you. I don't want you to feel like you're facing all of this alone." Nia's lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked away for a moment before meeting his gaze. "People always say that," she muttered, "but they don't mean it. They say they'll be there, but when things get hard, they disappear." Marcus's heart ached at her words, the weight of her experiences evident in her tone. He took a deep breath and replied, "I'm not going anywhere, Nia. That's a promise." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or disbelief, but she didn't push further. Instead, she nodded. "Okay, let's get it over with." A few days later, Marcus and Nia arrived at the testing facility. The sterile, brightly lit lobby buzzed with muted conversations and the faint hum of machinery. Marcus noticed how Nia's confident posture seemed slightly less certain here. She fiddled with the hem of her sweater, her eyes darting around the room. As they waited for their turn, Marcus tried to break the silence. "Have you ever done anything like this before?" Nia shook her head. "No, never had anyone to test with." Her blunt honesty hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. "Well, it's a pretty simple process. It won't take long, and we should have the results in a few days." Nia gave a non-committal shrug, her expression unreadable. When their names were called, they followed a technician into a small room filled with medical equipment. The process was straightforward. A quick cheek swab for each of them, handled with clinical efficiency. Marcus noticed how Nia tensed slightly as the technician approached her, though she didn't say a word. Afterward, as they walked out into the parking lot, Marcus turned to Nia. "Are you hungry? I thought we could grab lunch if you'd like." Nia hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure, why not?" They ended up at a small diner not far from the courthouse. The place had a retro charm, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. Nia ordered a burger and fries, while Marcus opted for a turkey sandwich. The conversation started slowly, revolving around safe topics like school and hobbies. But as the meal went on, Nia began to relax slightly. "You don't seem like a judge outside of court," she said at one point, her tone teasing. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what does a judge seem like?" "I don't know. Serious. Bossy. Like someone who's always about to yell at you for breaking the rules." "Well," Marcus said with a small smile, "I'll try not to be too bossy." Nia smirked, and for the first time, Marcus saw a glimpse of the playful teenager beneath the wall she had built. That afternoon, as Marcus dropped Nia off at her temporary foster home, he watched her walk to the front door, her posture as guarded as ever. Yet, something about the way she glanced back at him, a fleeting, tentative look, gave him hope. Back in his chambers, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the calendar on the wall. The test results would arrive in 3 days. 3 days to prepare himself for an answer that could change everything. He picked up the photograph MS. Harper had left with him and studied Olivia's face. Memories of their time together flooded his mind. Her laughter, her determination, the way she had always believed in the goodness of people. He thought of Nia's guarded demeanor and her quiet resilience. "I'll make this right," he murmured, his voice barely audible in the empty room. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a sense of purpose that extended beyond the courtroom. Whatever the results revealed, he was determined to be there for Nia, to be the kind of father Olivia would have wanted for her daughter. 3 days felt like an eternity for Marcus Grant. Each hour crawled by as he buried himself in case files, only to find his thoughts drifting back to Nia. The weight of the unanswered question hung over him, transforming his usually orderly mind into a swirl of possibilities. Could she really be his daughter? On the morning the test results were expected, Marcus arrived at his chambers early. The building was eerily quiet, the usual hum of activity replaced by a stillness that matched his unease. A sealed envelope sat on his desk, its edges crisp and unassuming, yet it felt heavier than any case file he had ever handled. Marcus hesitated, his hand hovering over the envelope. Finally, he took a deep breath, broke the seal, and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. His eyes scanned the words, his heart pounding in his chest. The test confirmed it. Nia Parker was his daughter. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply as the realization sank in. He wasn't sure whether to feel relief, joy, or guilt. For 12 years, Nia had been navigating a harsh world without him, and now their lives were irreversibly intertwined. Later that afternoon, Marcus arranged to meet Nia and MS. Harper in a private room at the courthouse. He wanted to deliver the news personally, without the distractions of a courtroom or a sterile medical setting. When Nia arrived, she wore her usual guarded expression, her arms crossed tightly as she sat across from Marcus. Ms. Harper took a seat nearby, her presence reassuring but unobtrusive. Marcus cleared his throat, struggling to find the right words. "Nia," he began, his voice steady but soft. "I have the test results." Nia's expression didn't change, though her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. "And?" she asked, her tone sharp but not unkind. Marcus slid the paper across the table toward her. "It's true. You're my daughter." Nia stared at the document, her eyes scanning the words as if she needed to see it for herself to believe it. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, she set the paper down and looked up at Marcus. "So now what?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. Marcus leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. "Now we figure this out together. I know this doesn't change the past, and I can't make up for the years we've lost, but I want to be here for you. Whatever that looks like, I'm willing to try." Nia's lips pressed into a thin line, and she nodded slowly. "People always say stuff like that," she said, her tone carrying a hint of skepticism. "But they don't always mean it." "I do," Marcus said firmly. "I'm not perfect, Nia, and I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm not going anywhere. That's a promise." In the days that followed, Marcus and Nia began the delicate process of building a relationship. It was slow and sometimes awkward, but there were moments of connection that gave Marcus hope. One afternoon, he invited Nia to his home for dinner. He spent hours preparing a meal, trying to remember what Ms. Harper had mentioned about Nia's favorite foods. When she arrived, Marcus greeted her with a warm smile, though he couldn't help but notice the way her eyes scanned the house, taking in every detail as if searching for clues about him. The dinner was simple, spaghetti and garlic bread, but Nia seemed to appreciate the effort. They talked about school, her favorite books, and her love of drawing. Marcus learned that she dreamed of becoming an architect, her eyes lighting up as she described her latest project, a futuristic skyscraper she had been designing in her sketchbook. "You'll have to show me sometime," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. Nia shrugged, though a faint smile tugged at her lips. "Maybe, if you're lucky." After dinner, Marcus showed her a photo album he had kept from his early years as an attorney. As they flipped through the pages, Nia paused at a picture of him and a group of colleagues, including Olivia. "That's her," Nia said softly, pointing to Olivia's radiant smile. "That's my mom." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat as he looked at the photo. "She was amazing," he said. "Smart, strong, and kind. You remind me of her in so many ways." Nia didn't respond immediately, but her fingers lingered on the edge of the photo, tracing its edges. Despite their progress, there were still challenges. Nia's trust wasn't something that could be earned overnight, and there were moments when her walls went back up. One evening, after a minor disagreement about curfew, Nia stormed out of the living room and locked herself in the guest bedroom Marcus had set up for her. He stood outside the door, unsure of whether to give her space or try to talk to her. "Nia," he said gently, his voice just loud enough to carry through the door, "I'm not mad. I just want to make sure you're safe. That's all this is about." There was silence for a long moment before the door creaked open. Nia stood in the doorway, her arms crossed and her expression defiant. "You don't have to treat me like a little kid," she said. "I know," Marcus replied, "but it's my job to look out for you, and sometimes that means setting rules. It doesn't mean I don't trust you. It just means I care." Nia's posture relaxed slightly, though her tone remained guarded. "I'm not used to this," she admitted. "Having someone care that much." Marcus offered a small smile. "It's new for me too, but we'll figure it out together." Over time, their bond deepened. Marcus attended one of Nia's school art shows, where her designs were displayed alongside her classmates' work. He felt a swell of pride as he listened to her explain the inspiration behind her sketches to a group of onlookers. "She's incredibly talented," one of her teachers said, pulling Marcus aside. "With the right support, she could go far." Marcus nodded, his heart swelling. "She will," he said confidently. That night, as they drove home, Nia looked over at him and said, "Thanks for coming. It meant a lot." "Of course," Marcus replied. "I wouldn't miss it." For the first time, Nia smiled without any hesitation, and Marcus felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Marcus and Nia were facing it together. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real, built on honesty and a shared determination to move forward. As Marcus sat in his living room one evening, watching Nia sketch in her notebook, he realized that while the path they were on was uncharted, it was one he was grateful to walk. Together, they were crafting a new beginning, one filled with challenges, hope, and the promise of something extraordinary. The sound of hammering echoed through the house as Marcus Grant adjusted the final piece of shelving in what he hoped would become Nia's room. He stepped back to admire his work, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. The room had been transformed over the past week. Gone were the beige walls and sparse decor that had once made it feel impersonal. In their place was a soft gray paint Nia had picked out herself, accompanied by a cozy desk near the window and a few framed sketches she had allowed Marcus to display. He glanced at the clock. Nia would be arriving any minute. Marcus's stomach churned with anticipation. This would be the first time she was staying at his home overnight. A small but significant step in their fragile journey to becoming a family. When the doorbell rang, Marcus took a deep breath before opening it. Nia stood on the porch with Ms. Harper by her side, a backpack slung over her shoulder. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation as she looked past him into the house. "Hey, Nia," Marcus greeted warmly. "Come on in. I've got something to show you." Nia stepped inside, her movements deliberate as if she were trying to decide whether she felt welcome. Ms. Harper gave Marcus an encouraging nod before leaving, her role in this moment complete. "I made some changes to one of the rooms," Marcus said, leading Nia down the hall. "I thought it could be your space if you wanted." When he opened the door, Nia's eyes widened slightly. She walked into the room, her fingers grazing the desk and the soft comforter on the bed. Her gaze landed on the framed sketches, and she frowned slightly. You hung these up? She asked, her voice guarded. I did, Marcus admitted. I thought they were amazing, but if you'd rather not have them displayed, I can take them down. Nia hesitated before shrugging. It's fine, I guess. Relieved, Marcus smiled. I'm glad you like it. She set her backpack down near the bed, her posture relaxing ever so slightly. It's nice, she said finally. Thanks. That evening, Marcus decided to cook dinner. He wasn't a seasoned chef, but he wanted to make an effort. As he prepared a simple meal of baked chicken and mashed potatoes, he glanced over his shoulder to see Nia sitting at the kitchen table, sketching in her notebook. What are you working on? He asked, genuinely curious. Just an idea for a community center, she replied without looking up. Something modern with a lot of glass and open spaces. Marcus wiped his hands on a towel and walked over to look. Her sketches were detailed and precise, filled with annotations about materials and layouts. This is incredible, he said, his admiration evident. You've got a real talent for this. Nia shrugged, though the corners of her mouth twitched upward. It's just something I do to pass the time. Well, Marcus said, returning to the stove, if passing the time looks this good, I can't wait to see what happens when you're serious. Dinner was a quiet but pleasant affair. Nia ate slowly, her eyes occasionally flicking to Marcus as if trying to gauge his sincerity. When he brought up Olivia, her demeanor shifted slightly. Your mom was an amazing person, Marcus said gently. She was kind, determined, and so smart. I see a lot of her in you. Nia looked down at her plate, her voice barely above a whisper. She used to tell me stories about you. She said you were stubborn, but that you always tried to do the right thing. Marcus chuckled softly. She wasn't wrong. I think she made me want to be better, even if I didn't realize it at the time. For a moment, the silence between them felt heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was a shared understanding, a bridge between past and present. As the weeks went on, Nia began spending more time at Marcus's home. He made a point of asking her preferences, from the food in the fridge to the kind of music they listened to in the car. Slowly but surely, Nia's walls began to crack, though there were still moments when she tested his patience. One evening, Marcus returned home from work to find that Nia had rearranged the furniture in the living room. The couch was pushed to one side, and the coffee table was now next to the window. What's going on here? Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. Nia crossed her arms defensively. It looks better this way. The couch was in a weird spot. Marcus sighed, his first instinct to point out that she should have asked first. But he caught himself, realizing this was her way of asserting some control in a world where she had so little. All right, he said finally. Let's see how it works. Nia blinked, surprised by his reaction. You're not mad? No, Marcus said with a small smile. But next time, maybe run it by me first. Deal? She nodded slowly, a flicker of trust crossing her face. Deal. Not every moment was smooth. There were nights when Nia retreated into herself, refusing to engage no matter how hard Marcus tried. On one such night, he found her sitting in the backyard, staring up at the stars. Mind if I join you? He asked, taking a seat on the steps beside her. Nia didn't respond right away, but she didn't move away either. After a long pause, she said, It's weird having someone care this much. I keep waiting for you to get tired of it and leave. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. I'm not going anywhere, Nia. I know it's going to take time, but I'm here for the long haul. She glanced at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. Finally, she nodded. Okay. It was a small word, but for Marcus, it meant everything. As the days turned into weeks, their bond continued to grow. Marcus learned to navigate the delicate balance between giving Nia space and showing her that he cared. He attended her school meetings, cheered her on at a soccer game she reluctantly joined, and even helped her paint her room a new color when she decided gray was too boring. One afternoon, as they were cleaning up after a painting session, Nia turned to Marcus and said, You're not as bad at this as I thought you'd be. Marcus laughed, his heart swelling at the unexpected compliment. I'll take that as a win. Nia smirked, but her eyes held a warmth that hadn't been there before. For the first time, Marcus felt like they were truly becoming a family. Not perfect, but real. And for both of them, that was enough. The clinking sound of Marcus Grant's coffee mug hitting the counter filled the quiet kitchen. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 6:30 a.m. Mornings had become a bustling affair since Nia started staying with him more regularly. While she was far from a morning person, Marcus enjoyed the routine of making her breakfast before school, a small but meaningful way to show he cared. As he flipped pancakes on the stove, Nia shuffled into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her hair was tied back loosely, and she wore her usual oversized hoodie. "Morning," Marcus greeted, placing a plate of pancakes on the table. Nia mumbled a barely audible reply as she sat down. She stared at the plate for a moment before picking up her fork. "You've got your school event later today," Marcus said, sitting across from her. "I cleared my schedule, so I can be there." Nia paused mid-bite, looking up at him with a mix of surprise and uncertainty. "You don't have to," she said quickly. "I want to," Marcus replied, his tone firm but kind. "It's important to me." Nia shrugged, though a faint blush crept into her cheeks. "Okay, if you want." The school event was a showcase of student projects, a chance for parents and guardians to see what their children had been working on. Marcus entered the gymnasium, scanning the rows of tables and poster boards. Nia stood near the back, her project displayed on a trifold board decorated with sketches and annotations. As Marcus approached, Nia glanced at him nervously. "It's just a math project," she said quickly, as if to lower his expectations. Marcus studied the display, his brow furrowing as he read through her work. It was a geometry project centered around architectural concepts, angles, shapes, and structures brought to life through her meticulous drawings. "This is incredible," Marcus said sincerely. "I didn't realize math and architecture were so connected." Nia looked down at her feet. "Yeah, well, I'm not great at the math part." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated before replying. I get stuck sometimes. Like, I can see what I want to do, but the numbers don't always make sense." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Math can be tough, but it's just a tool. You're already using it to create amazing designs. If you want, I could help you practice, or we could look into getting a tutor." Nia glanced at him, her expression wary but intrigued. "You do that?" "Of course," Marcus said with a smile. "I believe in you. Nia, you've got so much talent, and I'm here to help however I can." A week later, Marcus found himself at the city's Modern Art Museum, standing beside Nia in front of a towering model of a skyscraper. The architecture exhibit had been his idea, a way to nurture her passion while spending quality time together. Nia's eyes lit up as she studied the intricate designs and blueprints displayed on the walls. She moved from one exhibit to the next with an energy Marcus hadn't seen before, pointing out details and mumbling observations to herself. "Look at this one," she said excitedly, gesturing to a glass-walled structure. "The way they use natural light is so smart. It makes the whole space feel open but still functional." Marcus watched her, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You sound like a pro already," he teased gently. Nia smirked, but didn't look away from the exhibit. "Maybe one day." They continued through the gallery, stopping at a section dedicated to sustainable architecture. Nia's enthusiasm grew as she examined models of eco-friendly buildings with solar panels and rainwater collection systems. "You know," Marcus said, breaking the silence, "you could design something like this one day. Maybe even better." Nia glanced at him, her skepticism evident. "You think so?" "I know so," Marcus replied confidently. "You've got the vision and the passion. The rest is just practice." For a moment, Nia looked at him, her defenses lowered. "Thanks," she said softly. As their bond deepened, Nia began to open up about her past. It started with small comments, fleeting mentions of her time in foster care. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a documentary about famous architects, Nia suddenly said, "Most of the foster homes weren't bad. They just didn't feel like home." Marcus muted the television, turning to face her. "Do you want to talk about it?" Nia hesitated, picking at the frayed edge of her sweater. "I don't know. It's just, I was always the new kid, always the one who didn't fit in. Some of the families were nice, but they had their own kids. It felt like there wasn't room for me." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the pain beneath the words. "You didn't deserve that," Marcus said gently. "You deserve to be somewhere you felt safe and loved." Nia shrugged. "It is what it is. I learned to take care of myself. It's easier that way." Marcus felt a pang of sadness, but also a surge of determination. "You don't have to do it all on your own anymore," he said. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Nia glanced at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of insincerity. After a moment, she nodded. "Okay." One night, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Nia brought up her mother. "Mom used to tell me stories about you," she said, her voice soft. Marcus paused, setting a plate on the drying rack. "She did?" Nia nodded. "She said you were stubborn but kind, that you cared about people, even if you didn't always show it." Marcus chuckled, his heart aching at the memory of Olivia. "She always knew how to see the best in people. Your mom was incredible, Nia. She loved you so much." "I miss her," Nia admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "She always made me feel like I could do anything, like I mattered." Marcus stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You do matter, Nia, and I know she'd be so proud of you." "I am." Nia looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thanks," she whispered. The following weekend, Marcus surprised Nia with a set of professional sketching supplies he had picked out after consulting one of her teachers. "These are for me?" Nia asked, her eyes wide as she examined the sleek pencils and sketch pads. "They are," Marcus said, smiling. "I thought you might like something to work with as you keep building your designs." For a moment, Nia didn't say anything. Then, she set the supplies down and hugged Marcus tightly. "Thanks," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat as he returned the embrace. "You're welcome, kiddo." As Nia pulled back and began sorting through the supplies with an eager grin, Marcus realized just how far they had come. Their journey was far from over, but the trust they were building was strong, unshakable. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't thought possible. Together, he and Nia were creating something new, something real. And for both of them, it was a bond worth fighting for. The idea had been simmering in Marcus Grant's mind for weeks. Every time Nia mentioned her mother, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and longing. He felt the urge to bring it up, but he also understood how delicate the subject was. For someone as guarded as Nia, pushing too hard could risk undoing all the progress they had made. One quiet evening, as they sat in the living room with a movie playing in the background, Marcus decided to broach the topic. Nia was curled up in her favorite corner of the couch, sketchbook balanced on her knees, though she seemed more focused on doodling than the screen. "Hey, Nia," Marcus said softly, careful not to disrupt her concentration. "Yeah," she replied without looking up, her pencil gliding across the paper. "I've been thinking," Marcus began, choosing his words carefully, "about your mom. I know how much she meant to you, and I was wondering, would you like to visit her grave sometime?" Nia froze, the pencil still in her hand. Slowly, she looked up at Marcus, her expression unreadable. "Why would I do that?" she asked, her voice sharp but not dismissive. Marcus leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "I thought it might be a way to feel closer to her," he explained, "to honor her memory. But only if you're ready. There's no pressure." Nia's eyes narrowed, and she set her sketchbook aside. "She's not there," she said bluntly. "It's just a stone in the ground. I don't need a grave to remember her." Marcus nodded, his expression understanding. "I get that, and I know it's not for everyone. But sometimes being in a place where you can talk to her, even if it feels a little strange, can help." "I talk to her all the time," Nia muttered, crossing her arms. "In my head, she doesn't need me standing in a cemetery to hear me." "Fair enough," Marcus said, not wanting to push. "If you ever change your mind, let me know. I'm here for whatever you need." Nia didn't respond, but Marcus noticed the way her jaw tightened as she picked up her sketchbook again. Days passed, and Marcus didn't bring up the subject again. He focused instead on the small routines they had built together, cooking dinner, helping with homework, and attending her school events. But the idea of visiting Olivia's grave lingered in his mind. He knew how important it was to give Nia the space to grieve in her own way, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the trip might help her find a sense of closure. One evening, after a soccer practice where Nia had scored her first goal, they stopped for ice cream to celebrate. As they sat in the car, the glow of the streetlights casting soft shadows on their faces, Nia broke the silence. "About the grave," she said suddenly, her voice hesitant. Marcus turned to her, keeping his expression neutral. "Yeah, I've been thinking," she continued, fiddling with the edge of her ice cream cone. "Maybe we could go. Not now, but sometime." A mixture of relief and pride swelled in Marcus's chest, though he kept his tone calm. "Whenever you're ready," he said. "There's no rush." Nia nodded, her gaze fixed on the window. "I just don't know what I'd even say. It feels weird. It doesn't have to be anything specific." Marcus reassured her. "Sometimes just being there is enough." The following Saturday, they made the trip. The cemetery was a few hours away, located in the small town where Olivia had spent her final years. Marcus had packed a cooler with snacks and water, anticipating a quiet but emotionally heavy journey. Nia sat in the passenger seat, unusually quiet. She stared out the window as the landscape blurred by, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Marcus resisted the urge to fill the silence, understanding that she needed this time to process. When they arrived, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine. Marcus parked the car, and they walked together through the neatly arranged rows of headstones. Nia carried a small bouquet of daisies, Olivia's favorite flowers, according to Ms. Harper. When they reached Olivia's grave, Nia hesitated. The headstone was simple and unadorned, etched with Olivia's name and the dates of her birth and death. For a moment, Nia just stood there, the flowers trembling slightly in her hand. "Take your time," Marcus said gently, stepping back to give her space. Nia knelt down, placing the daisies carefully at the base of the headstone. She stared at the name, her lips pressing together as her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. "Hi, Mom," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's me." Marcus watched from a respectful distance, his heart aching for her. "I'm okay," Nia continued, her words slow and deliberate. I'm trying to be. Things are different now. I'm living with Marcus. She paused, glancing over her shoulder at him before looking back at the grave. "He's actually not terrible. He cares, I think, and he's trying." Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. "I wish you were here. I miss you so much. But I think you'd be proud of me. Of us." Nia wiped at her eyes, but the tears came anyway. Marcus stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. "I'll take care of her," Marcus said softly, addressing Olivia even though he wasn't sure if it was more for Nia's sake or his own. "I promise." Nia looked up at him, her eyes red but resolute. "She want that," she said quietly. The drive back home was lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. Nia seemed more at ease. Her posture relaxed as she leaned back in the seat. "Thanks for taking me," she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Marcus glanced at her and smiled. "Anytime." "You think she'd be happy?" Nia asked, her voice tentative. "I know she would," Marcus replied. "She'd be so proud of you, Nia. And I think she'd be glad we found each other." Nia didn't respond, but the faint smile on her face said everything. That evening, as they sat on the couch watching one of Nia's favorite shows, she leaned against Marcus for the first time. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. "I'm glad you're here," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the background noise of the TV. Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Me too, Nia. Me too." In that moment, Marcus realized that their bond was no longer just about making up for lost time. It was about building a future together, one rooted in trust, love, and the shared determination to honor Olivia's memory. And for the first time, he felt certain they were on the right path. The morning began like most others in the Grant household. Marcus in the kitchen, balancing a cup of coffee in one hand and flipping eggs with the other, while Nia sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. But even the comfortable rhythm they had settled into couldn't shield them from the occasional bumps in the road. Did you finish your geometry homework? Marcus asked, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of Nia. Nia didn't look up, her thumb scrolling steadily. I'll do it later. Marcus sat across from her, raising an eyebrow. You said that yesterday. You know the assignment's due today, right? Nia sighed, finally putting her phone down. I said I'll do it, okay? Can you not hover? I'm not hovering, Marcus replied, his tone calm but firm. I'm reminding you. There's a difference. Well, it feels like hovering, Nia muttered under her breath, stabbing a piece of toast with her fork. Marcus leaned back, taking a moment to steady himself. Moments like these were becoming more common as Nia tested the boundaries of their growing relationship. While she had made strides in trusting him, her independence and lingering fear of disappointment often made her defensive. I'm not trying to nag, Marcus said gently. I just don't want you to fall behind. You're smart, Nia. Too smart to let something small trip you up. Nia glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. Fine, she said grudgingly. I'll finish it after breakfast. Marcus nodded, satisfied for now. Deal. Later that evening, Marcus found himself navigating another parenting challenge. Nia had asked to attend a party one of her classmates was hosting, but Marcus was hesitant. Who's going to be there? He asked as they stood in the living room. Nia clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. Just some kids from school, she replied, rolling her eyes. It's not a big deal. It's a big deal to me, Marcus countered. I need to know who's supervising and when you'll be home. Nia groaned, throwing her hands up. You don't trust me. It's not about trust, Marcus said patiently. It's about making sure you're safe. That's my job. While it's annoying, Nia shot back. Marcus took a deep breath, resisting the urge to escalate. Look, I'm not saying you can't go. I just need some details first. That's not unreasonable, is it? Nia huffed, but eventually relented. Fine. I'll text Sarah and ask her mom to call you. Thank you, Marcus said, his tone steady but firm. As Nia stomped off to her room, Marcus couldn't help but smile faintly. She was stubborn, just like her mother, but he saw it as a strength. Despite the occasional arguments, Nia had begun to lean on Marcus in ways she never had before. Her geometry struggles were a constant source of frustration, but she surprised him one evening by asking for help. Can you show me how to do this? She asked, holding out her textbook. Marcus looked up from his laptop, momentarily caught off guard. Of course, he said, motioning for her to sit beside him. They spent the next hour working through equations together, Marcus patiently explaining each step. Nia's confidence grew with each problem she solved, and by the end of the session, she was smiling. See, Marcus said, nudging her shoulder playfully. Told you you're smart. Nia rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her grin. Yeah, don't let it go to your head. One Saturday, Marcus decided to take Nia on a surprise outing. He had heard about a local event where aspiring architects could participate in a design challenge, and he thought it might be the perfect opportunity to encourage her passion. When they arrived, Nia's eyes lit up as she saw the various stations set up with drafting tables, modeling clay, and even virtual reality tools for 3D designs. This is so cool, she said, her voice filled with excitement. Thought you might like it, Marcus replied, smiling. Go ahead, show them what you've got. Nia spent hours immersed in the activities, sketching and building with a focus that impressed even the event organizers. Marcus watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride. As they drove home that evening, Nia turned to him, her expression unusually serious. Thanks for taking me today, she said quietly. You're welcome, Marcus replied, glancing at her with a smile. I love seeing you do what you're passionate about. Nia hesitated, then added, and thanks for not giving up on me. I know I'm not always easy to deal with. Marcus's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly, his throat constricting with emotion. Nia, you're worth every bit of effort. And just so you know, I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Nia looked out the window, but Marcus caught the faintest smile on her lips. The next week, Nia surprised Marcus in return. She had stayed up late working on a project for school, and when she showed it to him, his jaw dropped. The model she had built, a community center designed to be both eco-friendly and welcoming, was breathtaking. This is amazing, Marcus said, examining the intricate details. "You've got a real gift, Nia." "Thanks," she said, her voice soft but filled with pride. As Marcus looked at her, he realized how far they had come. The girl who once kept everyone at arm's length was now letting him in, little by little. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real, built on trust and a shared determination to move forward. And for Marcus, that was more than enough. The morning sun filtered through the curtains in Marcus Grant's living room, casting a warm glow over the cozy space that had slowly become more than just a house. It was a home. Marcus was seated at the dining table, a cup of coffee in hand, as he glanced over Nia's latest math test. A bright red B+ was circled at the top of the page, a significant improvement from her earlier struggles. When Nia walked into the room, still groggy from sleep, Marcus held up the paper with a grin. "Look at this. I knew you had it in you." Nia smirked, her steps slow as she made her way to the table. "It's just a B+, she said, trying to sound indifferent. "It's progress," Marcus replied, setting the test down. "And it's proof that your hard work is paying off. I'm proud of you, kiddo." A faint blush crept into Nia's cheeks as she sat down. "Thanks," she mumbled, reaching for a piece of toast. As the weeks passed, Nia's confidence continued to grow. Her geometry grades climbed steadily, thanks to the combination of Marcus's support and her determination. But it wasn't just school where Nia began to thrive. Her artistic talents were blossoming, too, and Marcus made a point of nurturing her passion. One Saturday, he surprised her with a trip to an art supply store. "You didn't have to do this," Nia said as they walked through the aisles, her eyes wide as she took in the rows of sketch pads, pencils, and paints. "I wanted to," Marcus replied. "You've got a gift, and I want to make sure you have everything you need to keep developing it." By the time they left the store, Nia was carrying a bag filled with supplies, including a set of professional drafting tools that Marcus insisted she try. That evening, Nia set up her new supplies in the corner of the living room. Marcus watched from the couch as she bent over a large piece of paper, her pencil moving with precision and intent. "What are you working on?" he asked after a while. Nia didn't look up. "It's a design for a library," she said. "I want it to feel open, with lots of light. Kind of like the museum we went to, but cozier." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. "Can I see?" Nia hesitated for a moment before turning the paper toward him. The sketch was rough but detailed, filled with notes about materials and layouts. "This is amazing," Marcus said, his admiration evident. "You've got such a clear vision. I can already picture it in my head." Nia shrugged, though the corners of her mouth lifted in a small smile. "It's not finished yet." "Well, when it is, I'd love to hang it up. Maybe even frame it," Marcus said. Nia rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide her grin. "You're such a dad." Marcus laughed. "And proud of it?" Their bond deepened with each passing day, built on a foundation of mutual respect and trust. Marcus embraced his role as Nia's father, attending her school events, helping her prepare for projects, and even learning the names of her favorite artists and architects. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table reviewing her latest assignment, Nia paused mid-sentence. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, "I never thought I'd have this." Marcus looked up, confused. "Have what?" "A family," Nia replied, her gaze fixed on her notebook. "I mean, I've been in foster homes before, but it never felt real, like I actually belonged." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. "You do belong, Nia. This is your home, and I'm your family. Always." Nia looked up at him, her expression vulnerable yet hopeful. "You mean that?" "Of course," Marcus said firmly. "You're stuck with me now." For the first time, Nia smiled without any hesitation. In the weeks that followed, Marcus continued to celebrate Nia's achievements, both big and small. He framed her library sketch as promised, hanging it in the hallway where it could be seen every day. He also surprised her with tickets to a local architecture symposium, where she had the chance to meet professionals in the field and learn about their work. Nia returned from the event buzzing with excitement. "There was this one speaker," she said, practically bouncing as she sat on the couch. She talked about how she designed a whole housing project that's sustainable and affordable. "It was amazing." Marcus smiled, thrilled to see her so inspired. That could be you one day. Maybe, Nia said, her eyes shining. I want to design things that matter, things that help people. You will, Marcus said confidently. I have no doubt. One night, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Nia spoke words that Marcus would never forget. You know, she began, her tone casual but sincere, you're not just my dad. You're my family. Marcus froze for a moment, the plate in his hands forgotten. He turned to look at Nia, who was focused on drying a glass, her expression unreadable. Thank you for saying that, he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. It means more than you know. Nia glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. Don't get all mushy about it. I'll try, Marcus said with a chuckle, though his heart felt full. As they settled into their routines, the house began to reflect the life they were building together. The walls were no longer bare, adorned with Nia's sketches and photos from the outings they had shared. The quiet corners of the home now echoed with laughter and the occasional friendly argument about what to watch on TV. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't thought possible. Nia wasn't just his daughter. She was his family, his inspiration, and a reminder of what it meant to truly live. And for Nia, Marcus wasn't just the man who had taken her in. He was her anchor, her support, and the father she never thought she'd have. Together, they were more than they had ever been alone. They were a family. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of change. Marcus Grant stood on the front porch, sipping his morning coffee as he watched the neighborhood stir to life. His gaze shifted to the second-floor window, where he knew Nia was finishing her latest project. The faint hum of her favorite playlist floated through the open window, a sign of her focus and creativity. For Marcus, mornings like this felt like a quiet triumph. The house was no longer just a place to rest after long days in court. It had become a home, a space filled with laughter, hard conversations, and the warmth of a growing bond. Inside, Nia sat at her desk, her drafting tools spread out around her. She leaned over a blueprint of a community recreation center she was designing for an upcoming school competition. The structure was modern and inviting, with features that reflected her vision of creating spaces where people could connect and thrive. Are you going to stare at that all morning, or are you going to let me see it? Marcus's voice called from the doorway. Nia turned, a sheepish smile spreading across her face. I'm almost done, she said. Give me 5 more minutes. Marcus chuckled and stepped into the room, leaning against the wall. Take your time. I'm just impressed with how far you've come. Nia raised an eyebrow. You make it sound like I couldn't draw a straight line before. That's not what I mean, Marcus replied, his tone softening. I mean how much confidence you found. You're not just good at this, Nia. You're amazing. And watching you work, seeing you grow, it's been one of the greatest things I've ever been part of. Nia's smile faded into something more thoughtful. I've been thinking about that, she said, her voice quieter. How different things are now. A year ago, I didn't think I'd ever have this. Any of it. A place where I belong. Someone who believes in me. Marcus crossed the room and rested a hand on her shoulder. You deserve all of it, he said. And I'm lucky to be part of your life. As the day unfolded, Marcus found himself reflecting on their journey. The past year had been a whirlwind of change and growth, marked by challenges that tested their patience and resilience. But those challenges had also revealed the depths of their strength. He thought back to their early days together, when Nia's walls had been so high it seemed impossible to break through. The quiet nights where she barely spoke, the arguments over curfews and schoolwork, the moments of doubt that lingered in both their hearts. But he also remembered the breakthroughs. The first time she shared her dreams of becoming an architect, the way her face lit up at the architecture exhibit, the quiet acknowledgement that he wasn't just her father, but her family. It struck him how much they had learned from each other. Marcus had entered this journey thinking he would be the one guiding Nia, teaching her how to trust and embrace her potential. But she had taught him just as much about resilience, about the power of vulnerability, and about the importance of showing up, even when the path wasn't clear. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Marcus decided to share some of his reflections. You know, he began, setting down his fork, this year has taught me a lot. I've spent most of my life focused on work, thinking that success meant control and predictability. But being your dad has shown me that real success is about connection. It's about being there for the people you care about. Nia looked at him, her expression curious. That sounds pretty deep for dinner conversation. Marcus laughed. Maybe, but it's true. You've changed my life, Nia. And I want you to know how proud I am of you. Not just for your grades or your projects, but for the person you're becoming. You're strong, kind, and brave. And I'm grateful every day that I get to be your dad. Nia's eyes softened, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she smiled. Thanks, Marcus. That means a lot. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Marcus? I thought we agreed on dad. Nia laughed, a sound that filled the room with warmth. Fine. Thanks, Dad. After dinner, they sat together in the living room, flipping through a photo album Marcus had put together. It was filled with snapshots of their journey, pictures from school events, outings, and quiet moments at home. This one's my favorite, Nia said, pointing to a photo of them standing outside the art supply store, bags in hand and matching grins on their faces. That was a good day, Marcus agreed. But I think this one's my favorite. He pointed to a picture of Nia holding her framed library sketch, her smile wide and genuine. Nia leaned back against the couch, her expression contemplative. We've come a long way, haven't we? We have, Marcus said, and we've got so much more ahead of us. As the night grew quieter, Marcus found himself thinking about the broader lessons of their story. Life, he realized, wasn't about avoiding challenges. It was about facing them head-on, knowing that growth came from struggle. For Nia, the journey had been about learning to trust and believe in herself. For Marcus, it had been about embracing vulnerability and redefining what it meant to be a parent. Their story was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the willingness to try, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. It was a reminder that family wasn't defined by perfection, but by the commitment to show up for each other, day after day. Before heading to bed, Nia stopped by Marcus's room, hesitating in the doorway. "Good night, Dad," she said softly. "Good night, Nia," Marcus replied, smiling as he watched her disappear down the hall. As he turned off the lights, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but he knew they would face them together. And for the first time in a long time, he felt ready, not just to tackle what lay ahead, but to embrace it fully with Nia by his side. They weren't just father and daughter. They were a family. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heartfelt story. We wish you a joyful and warm Christmas filled with love and happiness. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join us for more inspiring stories to come. See you in the next one.